The small town had always been quiet. It wasn't a place known for fame or fortune, just a community of people who lived simple lives. But for one boy, the town's slow rhythm was anything but peaceful. His family had once been well respected, and their home was filled with laughter and warmth. But that was before everything changed, before his father had lost everything. The boy, a teenager now, had spent his whole life watching his mother fight to keep their heads above water. His father had been a hard worker, always the kind of man people turned to when they needed help. But everything had shifted when a powerful billionaire made a decision that tore his father's company apart. The company had been the heart of the town's economy, providing jobs for many families, including his. When the billionaire's corporation bought out the company, it was the beginning of a disaster. His father had done everything he could to save the company. He worked day and night trying to fix the damage. But in the end, it was too much. The company collapsed and his father lost his job. Their home was sold, and their life of comfort and security was gone. The boy's father became a shadow of the man he once was, struggling with depression and shame. It was hard for the boy to understand why a decision made by a man so far removed from their lives could cause so much pain. The boy had seen his family suffer. His mother, strong as she was, had to take on extra work just to keep food on the table. The boy had watched her cry at night, wondering how they had gotten to this point. Despite all the hardship, his mother never lost hope. She always told him to keep dreaming, to keep striving for something better. But how could he dream when the world seemed to have dealt his family such a cruel blow? It wasn't just his family who was affected. The whole town was struggling. Small businesses closed, people lost their jobs, and the once thriving community was now in decline. The boy would often hear people whispering about the billionaire, blaming him for their misery. But it wasn't just the money he had taken from them. It was the sense of injustice, the feeling that someone so powerful could come into their lives and change everything, without any regard for the consequences. The boy knew the billionaire's name, of course. Everyone did. He was one of the richest men in the world, a man whose decisions shaped entire industries. He was the kind of person people either admired or despised. But for the boy, the billionaire wasn't just a distant figure on the news. He was the reason his family had fallen apart. He was the one who had destroyed everything his father had worked for. As the years went by, the boy became more and more determined to make something of himself. He couldn't change what had happened to his family, but he could control his future. He spent his days studying, reading, and working odd jobs to help his mother. Every spare moment was dedicated to figuring out how to escape the life they had been handed. He dreamed of a future where he didn't have to rely on anyone, especially not the billionaire who had ruined everything. The boy would often walk past the billionaire's mansion on the outskirts of town. It was a grand building, far more magnificent than anything in the small town. The gates were always closed, and the house was surrounded by lush gardens and high walls. The boy would look up at it, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. How could someone live in such luxury while people like his family struggled to survive? But at the same time, he couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to have that kind of power, to never worry about money or status. He tried not to think about the billionaire too much. He knew it wouldn't do him any good. But every time he passed by that mansion, that feeling of injustice flared up inside him. It was like a fire that wouldn't go out, and he couldn't shake it. He wondered if the billionaire ever thought about the people he had hurt, or if he even knew their names. Did he ever wonder how the decisions he made affected the lives of others, or was he too wrapped up in his own world to care? The boy knew he could never forgive the billionaire for what had happened to his family. But deep down, he knew that in order to move forward, he had to let go of the anger. It was hard. It was so hard. But his mother always told him that holding on to hatred would only weigh him down. She taught him to be strong, to rise above the circumstances no matter how unfair they seemed. One night, as the boy walked home from another long day of work, something unexpected happened. He was passing the restaurant in town when he noticed a figure sitting alone at a table by the window. The man was dressed in expensive clothes, his face familiar. It was the billionaire. The boy couldn't believe it. He had heard rumors that the billionaire sometimes visited the town, but he had never imagined he would see him so close. He stood frozen for a moment, watching the man from the street. The billionaire seemed to be lost in thought, his head resting on his hand, his eyes distant. The boy felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of him wanted to run over to the table and confront the man, demand an explanation for what he had done to his family. But another part of him knew that this wasn't the time. The boy had always been patient, always waited for the right moment. This wasn't it. Instead, he turned and walked away, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure why he had decided not to approach the billionaire. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was because he didn't know what he would say. Or maybe, just maybe, it was because he knew that confronting the billionaire wasn't going to fix anything. The only way to change his life was to take control of it himself. As the boy walked home that night, he couldn't shake the image of the billionaire sitting alone in that restaurant. It felt like fate had led him there, but he wasn't sure what it meant. Maybe one day their paths would cross again, and when that day came, he would be ready. The boy's life continued on its slow and steady course. He worked hard every day, helping his mother as best as he could. He had grown used to the struggles they faced, yet there was always that unshakable feeling that something needed to change. It was on one of those long, tiring nights that he found himself back at the same restaurant where he had seen the billionaire just weeks ago. The evening had begun like any other. The boy had been walking home after a long shift, his thoughts wandering as he made his way down the street. He was tired, physically drained from working all day, but his mind kept racing. He had begun to feel the weight of his small town's expectations and his own desire for something more. He didn't expect to see the billionaire again, not after that brief encounter. The man seemed so far removed from his world, from his life, but that night, as he walked past the familiar restaurant, he noticed the man sitting by the window again. He was alone, sipping on what looked like a glass of wine, staring out at the street as if lost in thought. The boy stood frozen for a moment, uncertain of what to do. His mind flashed back to everything that had happened to his family. The pain, the disappointment, the way their lives had been turned upside down. He remembered his father's face when he realized the company was gone, the devastation in his eyes when he realized his years of hard work had amounted to nothing. All of that because of one decision, one man's decision. The boy took a deep breath. He couldn't just stand there, unable to act. There was something inside him that urged him to go in, to speak to the billionaire, to ask him at the very least why he had done it. But before he could move, something strange happened. The billionaire looked up and their eyes met. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The boy could feel his heart race, but the billionaire simply looked at him, almost as if he recognized him. There was no anger in his eyes, no surprise, just a quiet acknowledgement. The boy had always imagined what it would be like to confront the man who had ruined his family, but in that moment, he felt an odd sense of calm. The billionaire gestured for him to come inside. "You can join me for a drink if you like," he said, his voice calm and measured. The boy hesitated, unsure of what to do. He had never imagined he would be invited into the billionaire's world, not after everything that had happened, but something about the man's calm demeanor made him take the step inside. As the boy sat down across from the billionaire, he found himself staring at the man who had been responsible for his family's downfall. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times in his head, but it felt nothing like he had expected. The billionaire wasn't cold or distant as the boy had imagined. He seemed tired, worn down even, and there was a sadness in his eyes that the boy couldn't quite place. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The boy looked down at his hands, trying to gather his thoughts. He had so many questions, so many things he wanted to say, but he didn't know where to begin. Finally, it was the billionaire who broke the silence. "I know you probably hate me," the billionaire said, his voice soft, "and I can't blame you for it. But you should know it wasn't personal. It never was." The boy's heart raced. He hadn't expected the billionaire to speak like this. He had thought he would be defensive or maybe even dismissive. But the man was speaking with an honesty that caught the boy off guard. "It wasn't just about business for me," the billionaire continued. "I'm sure that's hard for you to believe, but that's the truth. I've spent years trying to make things right, trying to find some way to undo the damage I've caused. But you can't take back the things you've done. You can only move forward." The boy felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of him wanted to lash out, to scream at the man for the years of pain his family had suffered. But another part of him recognized something in the billionaire's voice. It wasn't the typical arrogance he had expected. There was real regret there, real remorse, and that made the boy question everything he thought he knew. "I don't know what you want from me," the boy said, his voice steady but unsure. "I don't know if there's anything you can do to fix what's happened." The billionaire nodded slowly. "I understand, but I want to help. I can't undo what's been done, but I can offer you something that might help you move forward, a chance to build something for yourself." The boy looked at him, his mind spinning. He wasn't sure if he could trust the billionaire. He wasn't sure if he even wanted to. But there was something in the way the man spoke that made him think twice. "I don't know if I can work for you," the boy said, his voice thick with uncertainty. "I don't know if I can work for the person who destroyed my father's life." The billionaire sighed, his eyes dropping to the table. "I understand, but I'm offering you a chance to change your own life, to do something for yourself, not just for your family. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to like me, but I want to give you the opportunity to move beyond what happened." For the first time in years, the boy felt something that had been missing. Hope. It was faint, fragile, but it was there. He didn't know if he could accept the billionaire's offer. He didn't know if he could work with the man who had destroyed everything he had once known. But the idea of a future, of a chance to change his own path, was something he couldn't ignore. "I'll think about it," the boy said, standing up. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that this moment, this conversation, was something he couldn't ignore. Maybe, just maybe, this was the opportunity he had been waiting for. Maybe it wasn't about revenge. Maybe it was about moving forward. As he walked out of the restaurant, the boy's mind was racing. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't even know if he was ready to accept the billionaire's offer. But he knew one thing for sure. His life was about to change, whether he was ready for it or not. The boy spent the next few days in a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The offer from the billionaire was still fresh in his mind, and every time he tried to think about it logically, his heart pulled him in different directions. Could he really work for the man who had torn his family apart? Could he trust him even after everything that had happened? He tried to push those thoughts aside as best as he could. He had a job to do, a life to lead. But no matter how hard he tried, his mind kept drifting back to that moment in the restaurant. The billionaire's words had been so unexpected, so different from the arrogant, untouchable figure he had imagined. The boy couldn't deny the sincerity in the man's voice, nor the weight of what he had said. The decision wasn't an easy one. The boy's pride, his anger, and the memories of his father's defeat all stood in the way. But then there was something else, a spark of hope, a glimmer of a new beginning. He wasn't sure where it would lead, but something deep inside told him that he couldn't walk away from this opportunity without giving it a chance. It took him a few days to gather his thoughts, to sort through his feelings. His mother noticed the change in him, the way he had become more distant and distracted. She had seen how hard he had worked all these years, how much he had suffered, and she didn't want him to make a decision he would regret. But when she asked him about it, he just told her that he needed to figure things out on his own. One evening, as the boy sat alone in his room, staring out the window, he made up his mind. He was going to take the billionaire's offer. He didn't know if it would lead to something good or bad, but he knew that if he didn't try, he would regret it for the rest of his life. The next morning, he walked back to the restaurant. He was nervous, his heart pounding in his chest, but there was also a sense of resolve in his steps. He didn't know what to expect, but he was ready for whatever came next. The billionaire wasn't there, but he had left a note at the front desk for the boy to meet him at his office later that day. As the boy walked into the billionaire's office, he felt a mixture of awe and nervousness. The office was grand, spacious, and filled with expensive furniture, artwork, and awards that seemed to shine in the perfect lighting. It was a world completely different from the boy's own, but he pushed aside his discomfort and focused on the task at hand. The billionaire stood as the boy entered, offering him a seat. There was no pretense in his greeting, no effort to hide the exhaustion that seemed to have settled into his features. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the billionaire broke the silence. "I'm glad you came," he said simply, his voice calm and reassuring. "I know this isn't easy, and I don't expect you to forget what happened. But I want to give you something. A chance to change things for yourself, for your family." The boy nodded, unsure of how to respond. He had never imagined himself sitting in a room like this with someone like the billionaire. The whole situation felt surreal, but deep down, he knew he had made the right choice by coming here. The billionaire continued, I know this might sound strange, but I want you to come and work with me. Not just as an employee, but as someone who can help me make decisions. Someone I can trust. I've spent so many years focused on building my empire that I forgot about the people I hurt along the way. I want to change that, and I think you could be part of that change. The boy was taken aback. He had expected some form of an offer, but this was something different. The billionaire wasn't asking him to just work for him. He was asking for his help, his input. It felt like a strange role to step into, but it also felt like something he could be a part of, something bigger than himself. I don't know anything about business, the boy said, his voice hesitant. I don't know if I can help you with that. The billionaire smiled gently. It's not about business knowledge. It's about perspective. You've lived through hardship, seen what it's like to struggle. You have a perspective that I don't. That's why I think you're the right person for this. I don't want someone who just knows the numbers. I want someone who understands people. The boy sat back, trying to digest what the billionaire had just said. The weight of the offer was heavy, but it was also full of possibilities. It wasn't just a job. It was a chance to make a real impact. I'll give it a try, the boy said finally, his voice steady. But I need to be clear. I won't forget what happened to my family. I'm not here to forgive you or forget what you did. But I'm here because I believe I can do something good with this opportunity. The billionaire nodded as if he had expected the boy to say that. I understand. And I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want to show you that I'm willing to make things right in any way I can. The decision was made, and with it came a new chapter in the boy's life. He didn't know exactly where it would take him, but he knew one thing. It was a step toward something better. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of hope, something he hadn't felt in years. As the boy started his new job, the challenges were many. It wasn't easy adjusting to the fast-paced world of the billionaire's business. He felt out of place at times, surrounded by people who had spent their lives in this world of wealth and power. But with each passing day, he began to learn more. The billionaire took him under his wing, showing him the ins and outs of the business world, introducing him to people who could help him grow. Despite the difficulties, the boy was determined to succeed. He was more focused than ever, driven by the hope that this opportunity would be the key to changing his life. But even as he worked alongside the billionaire, a part of him couldn't let go of the past. The pain of what had happened to his family still lingered, but it no longer controlled him. He was learning to move forward, to build a new future for himself and his mother. The boy's life was no longer defined by the past. It was defined by the choices he made, by the opportunities he took. And as he sat in that office, surrounded by the world of wealth and influence, he couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, he was exactly where he needed to be. The boy's life had taken a drastic turn since he decided to accept the billionaire's offer. Every day was a new challenge, a new opportunity to prove himself. At first, the boy had felt out of place in the luxurious offices and boardrooms. But over time, he grew more comfortable. He was learning the ropes, not just of business, but of how power, influence, and wealth intertwined in ways he had never imagined. Working alongside the billionaire wasn't easy. The man was demanding, constantly pushing for excellence, sometimes to the point where it felt overwhelming. But the boy never backed down. He understood that this was his chance to change everything, not just for himself, but for his mother and the small town that had once been his whole world. As the boy continued to work with the billionaire, something unexpected started to happen. The more he learned, the more he saw that the man wasn't just the ruthless businessman he had once imagined. The billionaire was complex, a man filled with contradictions. He was driven by success, yes, but he also had a deep sense of regret about the damage he had caused in his life. It wasn't just about money for him anymore, it was about redemption. But the boy was still struggling with his own feelings. The anger from his past wasn't easy to let go of. Even as he grew closer to the billionaire, even as they began to work together on projects that could help the town, the boy couldn't shake the resentment that lingered. He couldn't forget what had been taken from his family, the years of struggle and pain. And no matter how much the billionaire tried to make amends, the boy didn't know if he would ever be able to forgive him. Despite the tension, something began to shift. The boy started to see the changes in the billionaire. The man was trying to use his wealth and influence to give back, to create jobs, to restore what had been lost. Slowly but surely, he was using his power to undo some of the harm he had caused. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One day, the boy found himself standing in front of a large conference room, looking out at a group of influential business leaders. It was a moment he had never imagined would come. He had been asked to speak, to present the new plans they were working on, plans that could help the town rebuild, plans that could give people hope for the future. The boy's heart raced as he stood before the group, but he forced himself to stay calm. When he spoke, his voice was steady, though it shook slightly at first. He talked about the struggles his town had faced, about the pain his family had endured, and about the importance of giving back to the communities that had supported the billionaire's business. He didn't hold back. He spoke from the heart, sharing his personal experiences and the lessons he had learned. The room was silent as he spoke, and when he finished, there was a moment of stillness. Then, to his surprise, the room erupted into applause. The boy couldn't believe it. He had spoken honestly, from a place of real emotion, and it had resonated with them. He had never imagined he would stand in front of such an audience, let alone have them respond so positively. The billionaire, sitting at the front of the room, looked at the boy with a look of pride. It wasn't just the business side of things that mattered anymore. The boy had shown them that there was something deeper at play, something more important than profits and numbers. It was about people. It was about rebuilding lives, restoring dignity, and showing that even the smallest voices could make a difference. After the presentation, the boy and the billionaire spoke in private. The billionaire was visibly impressed with how the boy had handled himself. "You're more than just an assistant or a worker," the billionaire said. "You've become a leader. I never expected you to have such an impact on people, but I should have known. You've lived through more than most of us could ever imagine." The boy didn't know how to respond. He had never thought of himself as a leader. He had only ever thought about surviving, about trying to make things better for his family. But now, standing here in this office, surrounded by people who had once seemed so far out of his reach, he realized that maybe he had already begun to change. Maybe he had already begun to make a difference. As the days went by, the boy's role in the company continued to grow. The billionaire began to trust him more, giving him more responsibility, involving him in key decisions. Slowly, the boy realized that his life was no longer just about survival. It was about creating something meaningful, something that could leave a lasting impact. But as his career took off, so did the pressure. The expectations from the billionaire and others in the company were high. The boy felt the weight of it all, sometimes wondering if he was ready for such a big role. But with every challenge came a new opportunity. He had learned so much from the billionaire, not just about business, but about life. He had learned about resilience, about using one's power to help others, and about finding redemption even in the face of great loss. One evening, after a particularly stressful day, the boy sat alone in the office, reflecting on everything that had happened. He had come a long way from the days of feeling powerless. He had gone from a boy who had watched his family suffer to a young man who was now helping to rebuild what had been broken. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As he looked out the window, he realized that the billionaire had given him more than just a job. He had given him a chance to change his life, a chance to make a real difference in the world. And for the first time in a long time, the boy felt at peace with his decision. In the months that followed, the town began to see changes. New businesses were opening, people were finding jobs, and the community was slowly beginning to recover from the devastation that had once seemed so overwhelming. The boy had played a key role in these changes, working alongside the billionaire to bring about the transformation. The boy's relationship with the billionaire had evolved. They weren't just business partners anymore. They were allies working together to build something better. The boy had forgiven the billionaire in his own way, not because the man had asked for forgiveness, but because he had seen the genuine effort to make things right. And so, the boy's journey continued. What had started as an act of chance, an offer that seemed too strange to refuse, had turned into something much more. The boy had found a new purpose, a new life, and with it a new sense of hope. The boy's life had changed more than he could have ever imagined. It had been a long journey from the days of struggle and hardship, when his family had been torn apart by a decision made far beyond their control. Now, sitting in a sleek office in a high-rise building, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. It wasn't just the new opportunities or the money that had changed his life. It was something deeper. It was the chance to rebuild not only his future, but his sense of self-worth. The town, too, had started to recover. Slowly but surely, the wheels of progress had begun to turn. New businesses were opening, jobs were being created, and the sense of hope that had long been absent was finally returning. The boy's role in this transformation had been pivotal. He had worked tirelessly with the billionaire not just to restore the town's economy, but to restore its spirit. Still, there were moments when the weight of the past pressed down on him. The boy often found himself reflecting on the life he had left behind, the family he had lost, and the pain that still lingered. The resentment, though softened, was still there. It wasn't something he could easily forget. But over time he realized that forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past, it was about choosing to move forward. One evening, the boy found himself standing in front of a new building that had just been completed. It was a community center, a symbol of the new future they were trying to build. The billionaire had asked him to take the lead on this project, and now it was finally finished. The boy had poured so much of himself into this place, and as he looked at it, he felt a sense of pride that he hadn't felt in years. The billionaire arrived, as he often did when something important was happening. They stood together in silence, taking in the sight of the building. It was clear that the boy had put his heart into this project, and the billionaire couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration. "You've done something incredible here," the billionaire said, his voice filled with genuine respect. "This is more than just a building. It's a new beginning for this town. And you were the one who made it happen." The boy smiled, but the words didn't feel like enough. It wasn't just about the building. It was about everything that had led to this moment. It was about the long hours, the setbacks, the doubts, and the sacrifices. It was about proving that despite everything that had happened, he had the strength to overcome it all. "I didn't do it alone," the boy replied, his voice steady. "We did it together." The billionaire nodded, acknowledging the boy's words. "That's what I admire about you," he said. "You never lost sight of what really matters. You didn't just want to rebuild the town. You wanted to give people a chance to rebuild their lives. And that's something I didn't understand until you showed me." For the first time in a long while, the boy felt a sense of peace. It wasn't just about the success of the project, it was about the journey, about how much he had grown and how much he had learned. The boy had gone from a place of anger and resentment to a place of understanding and purpose. He had learned that forgiveness didn't mean excusing the past. It meant making a choice to rise above it. The town's recovery wasn't just a result of the boy's hard work. It was a collective effort. The people had come together, supporting one another, working side by side to rebuild what had been lost. The boy had become a symbol of that effort. He had shown them that even in the face of tragedy, there was always a way forward. As the months passed, the boy's role in the company grew. He became more than just an assistant or a worker. He became a leader in his own right. His opinions were valued, his ideas were sought after, and his influence began to reach far beyond the walls of the billionaire's company. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't always smooth, but the boy had proven that he had what it took to make a difference. But even as his career flourished, the boy never lost sight of what really mattered. He continued to work with the billionaire to help the town, to create opportunities for people who had once been left behind. He never forgot where he had come from or the people who had supported him along the way. One day, the boy found himself back in the small town where it all began. He was standing on the same street corner where he had once walked home from work, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. It felt like a lifetime ago. The town had changed, and so had he. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. The people were stronger, more hopeful. They had found their way back thanks in part to the boy's efforts, but also because they had learned to believe in themselves again. As he walked through the streets, people greeted him with smiles and nods of respect. He was no longer just the boy who had been left behind. He was someone who had made a difference, someone who had given them hope. And as he looked around, he realized that he had done more than just rebuild the town. He had helped rebuild himself. The boy didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He was ready for whatever came next. He had come a long way from the boy who had watched his family suffer, from the boy who had dreamed of something more. He had built a new life, a new purpose, and now he was ready to continue the journey. As he left the town and headed back to the city, The boy couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. He had come full circle. What had started as a chance meeting, an unexpected opportunity, had led him to a place he never thought possible. The boy had found success, yes, but more importantly, he had found peace, and that was something he could carry with him for the rest of his life. The boy had come a long way since that first meeting with the billionaire. The path he had taken was filled with challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt, but it had also been full of growth, change, and new beginnings. He had learned more than he could have ever imagined, not just about business, but about life, about resilience, and about the power of second chances. Now, standing at the top of a high-rise building overlooking the city, the boy felt a strange sense of fulfillment. His life had transformed in ways he couldn't have predicted. The town that had once seemed so small, so trapped in its own struggles, had begun to heal. And the boy, who had once felt powerless, had become someone people looked up to. His role in the recovery of the town had been pivotal, but it was more than that. He had shown people that even in the darkest of times there was always hope. But as the boy looked out at the sprawling city below, he couldn't help but wonder what the future held. There was still so much to be done. The town was still recovering, and there were still people who needed help. The boy had helped to lay the foundation, but there was more work to be done. The thought of what came next kept him up at night. The billionaire had become more than just a business partner. Over the years, they had formed a bond that went beyond the usual mentor-mentee relationship. They had become friends, allies working together to fix what had been broken. And yet, despite the progress, there was still a part of the boy that wasn't sure if he could ever completely forgive the man for what had happened to his family. He had moved forward, yes, but the past still lingered in the back of his mind. One evening, the boy sat alone in his office, reflecting on everything that had led to this point. He thought about his mother, the sacrifices she had made, and the way she had always believed in him, even when he had lost faith in himself. She had always told him that life wasn't just about surviving. It was about living, about finding meaning in the struggle. He had always thought that was just something she said to make him feel better, but now he understood. As the boy stared at the papers on his desk, he realized how far he had come. But the journey wasn't over. The work he was doing now, the projects he had started, were just the beginning. He wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. There was still so much to learn, so much to accomplish, and maybe, just maybe, it wasn't about reaching the destination. It was about the journey itself. The next day, the boy met with the billionaire in the conference room, just like they had done so many times before, but today was different. The boy had something on his mind, something he had been meaning to say for a long time. He had been holding on to it, unsure of how to approach the subject, but now, as he sat across from the man who had changed his life, he knew it was time to speak up. "I've been thinking," the boy began, his voice steady but uncertain, "about everything that's happened. About the town, about my family, and about you." The billionaire looked at him, his expression unreadable. He had always known that the boy had his reservations, his doubts. He had never expected forgiveness, but he had hoped for understanding. "I don't expect you to forgive me," the boy continued. "I know I've come a long way and I've learned a lot. But there's still something inside me, something I can't shake. I've done a lot of good, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished. But I still carry the weight of what happened. I can't forget that." The billionaire listened quietly, his gaze thoughtful. He had always known this moment might come, and he was prepared for it. "I understand," he said softly. "And I've always known that what I did can never be undone. What I can do is try to make amends, to show you that I'm not the same person I was back then." The boy nodded. He had always known that the billionaire was trying in his own way to make things right. But even after everything they had accomplished together, the boy still wasn't sure if he could let go of the past. "It's not about forgetting," the boy said quietly. "It's about choosing to move forward. I've learned that much. I've spent so much time looking back, holding on to anger and resentment. But I can't keep doing that. I can't keep letting the past control my future." The billionaire smiled, a small, genuine smile that seemed to reach his eyes for the first time in a long while. "You're right. The past is a part of who we are, but it doesn't define us. What matters is what we do now, what we choose to do with the time we have left." The boy took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. "I don't know if I can forgive you completely," he said, "but I can forgive myself. I can stop carrying the weight of what happened and start focusing on what comes next." The billionaire leaned forward, his expression sincere. That's all I ever wanted for you, to find peace, to find your own path, your own way forward. The boy sat back in his chair, feeling a sense of clarity wash over him. It wasn't just about the work they had done together, or the way the town had changed. It was about something deeper, something more personal. It was about the boy learning to forgive himself, to let go of the past and step into the future. I'm ready, the boy said finally. I'm ready to move forward, and I'm ready to help others do the same. The billionaire nodded, a look of understanding in his eyes. Then let's do it, he said. Let's make the world a better place, one step at a time. As the boy left the conference room, he felt a weight lifted off his shoulders. The future was uncertain, as it always had been, but now, for the first time, he felt ready to face it. The boy had learned that redemption wasn't just about other people. It was about forgiving yourself. And in that moment, he knew that his journey was far from over. It was only just beginning.